to interpreting the scares. That's right, we're back at it on our month-long journey through the nightmares with yet another film to check off that bucket list of terror. And this one's a movie that, of course, I've heard about. People talk about it from time to time, but I've never seen it myself. And by the way, this review is going to be unscripted. Usually I write my reviews and run it through a teleprompter, but every now and then I just like to talk about it. So today, we're talking about Event Horizon. Event Horizon is ultimately about a bunch of space folk flying through the stars when they come across, yes, the Event Horizon, a ship that once disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to it, where it went, what happened to the crew. So these people decide to board the ship to find that out. And of course, along the way, they run into a lot of scary things. So Event Horizon, you know, oddly enough, this movie came up quite a few times when I was researching Pandorum, when I reviewed that earlier on this month, because a lot of people connect the two. A lot of people compared them as if they exist in the same universe. They don't, of course, but it's almost like they're spiritual successors of one another. Now, after I saw Event Horizon, I do see the similarities. I understand why people compared them. I won't divulge what I've learned because this is definitely a film that has a lot of mystery surrounding it. There's a lot of stuff going on that you should really see yourself to really get the full impact of the film. But at the same time, when you watch it, you're definitely gonna be able to compare it to at least 3 very classic, very iconic horror films: Alien, The Shining, and Hellraiser. So it's similar to The Shining for 3 different reasons. One is that the setting of the film is basically a character in and of itself. So in The Shining, you had the hotel, which was basically a character, and in this, it's the Event Horizon, of course. Another similarity is kind of the flashback sequences that you get throughout the film that play a pretty vital role into the atmosphere of the film, and just kind of in general how scary it is. The third comparison that I actually make is that there's a scene in this movie where there's just buckets and buckets of blood that just kind of show up and they fill the screen, and this of course happened in The Shining as well. Obviously it's similar to Alien because it's a sci-fi horror film where basically this unknown force of evil is stalking these people and making their lives a living hell. It's similar to Hellraiser because of the practical effects and makeup done towards the end of the film when it comes down to the gore. I mean, even Clive Baker consulted on the film, and that makes a whole lot of sense based off of what it looks like towards the end and what's going on ultimately. And yet, even though it's borrowing from all these different things, it still feels like its own thing. It still feels iconic in and of itself. It's really good. A part of that has to do with all of the talent in the film that is contributing. So we have people like Sam Neill, Lawrence Fishburne, Jolie Richardson, Jason Isaacs, and a few others as well that are recognizable when it comes down to their long list of film titles. I could tell that Lawrence Fishburne got the role of Morpheus because of this movie, because the spaceship, it's pretty similar to the Nebuchadnezzar and everything. So you got all these different people, and they're all doing a really good job here. And they really helped make this film feel as iconic as it does. Even though, since this film came out, other movies have kind of played around with the same idea that this was going after. See Pandorum, for instance. It's still iconic. Can't help you. Now, the visuals with this film are kind of tricky, because when it first begins, there's a lot of CG artifacts that in the 90s when this came out looked pretty bad. I mean, they looked in your face bad. It was almost like they were trying to make a 3D film, because they have all these things floating in zero gravity that are floating towards the screen, and it's all CG. So you got CG like water bottles, lighters that are just kind of floating there, and like liquid artifacts just floating in zero G, and it all looks bad. It looks really, really bad. But once they turn on the artificial gravity in the spaceship, everything falls down and it looks fine. And after that point, I have to take into consideration the practical effects of the makeup and the gore. I have to take into consideration the set design of the ship itself, which is basically a character in the film. And all this plays into the visuals so that at the end of the day, the visuals are better than they are bad, essentially. So at first I was really worried, but thankfully I have nothing to worry about after all. Now, to be sure, because this came out in the 90s, there's some corny things going on. And most of that has to do with some of the lines spoken, the dialogue of the script. Some of it has to do with performances in general, and a lot of that's unavoidable because in the 90s, that's how it was. So if I were to tell you that it has aged amazingly well, that would be a flat out lie. Certain things just haven't, but at the same time, some of it still feels pretty appropriate and pretty awesome for nowadays, for modern times. I also know that this film was cut down significantly when it was made to avoid, an NC-17 rating that apparently kills movies or something. They had to remove like 30 minutes of footage, some of which I feel like was important for the overall atmosphere of the film. Without it, it feels a lot lighter. I was left wanting to see more of what was going on at the heart of the ship. I can't talk too much about that because I don't want to spoil you. Go in blindly, you'll see what I'm talking about, but there's a lot of mystery surrounding the heart of the ship, and it doesn't really show you much of anything when it comes to that, because I feel like a lot of that was just cut down, part of the 30 minutes that they got rid of. And unfortunately, I think that wasn't the right choice. I think they could have easily just cut down some content in order to avoid that blasted NC-17 thing, but not as much as they did. It came out in the 90s. So there's next to no possibility of you ever seeing a director's cut of the film because all that footage is lost. Oh well, for what it is though, I did find it really entertaining. I really got into it. I love the mystery behind it. I love the performances, the casting going on here, the production design, the set design, the makeup was extremely well done, and just the premise all around really made this thing feel iconic and unforgettable. So let's take a look at my final score for a second, which I rated B+ letter grade with a final score of 81% overall. So 81 out of 100 possible stars, which basically just means it's a good movie. It has some aging problems where you're like, okay, this definitely came out in the 90s, but at the same time, it really is made good enough so that if you watch it in 2022 or 2023 or whatever in the future, there's certain things about it that feel ageless. Take that as you will, and guys, let me know what you thought about Event Horizon in the comment section down below. What's your favorite sci-fi horror film? As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.